We talked about the fact that Planned Parenthood was very upset after the big, beautiful bill was passed, that they should not be defunded for the year. And now we head to Massachusetts, where a temporary restraining order has been placed.
The holiday.
Just happened. So why don't we break down what's going, because what they're trying to do, and once again, has halted President Trump's plans through one of these judges.
Yes, and again, not surprised. I think long term, this is a losing court battle for Planned Parenthood. But as we explained yesterday, they're just trying to survive the next really 8-9 months. Yeah. And if you can do that, the funding's not going to get cut, and then it's got to go through legislation again. And so you've survived another year. You've lived to, fight that battle out in Congress. And like I said yesterday, is if we don't stand up behind these members of Congress strongly who did this, and I mean, it took them going down to the final vote in the Senate. It took, J.D. Vance going to cast that first vote, necessarily running up to it. But July 4th, this bill gets signed into law. By Monday, the first working day since the holiday.
What do you think it happened?
They go to Massachusetts. They find the judge, Obama appointee, not surprisingly. Now, it's a TRO.
Yeah, because we'll say this. The Supreme Court, we thought, ruled where they could not do this.
It's not an injunction.
Okay, maybe break this all down.
This is a temporary restraining order in place for 2 weeks. Now, then we'll make a call. They're still going to have hearings on preliminary injunctions. And you still might have judges out there who said, I still believe under that case that I can issue this because Planned Parenthood's in all 47 states. And so if they're in 47 states, I can issue it for those 47 states specifically. That's what they're relying on here. But ultimately, this is really not about the nationwide injunction issue. This is about Planned Parenthood. How can they go into court and say, we must get federal funding? It just doesn't make sense to me. They are a private organization. If the government decides to fund private organization, you elect the government. That's one thing. On the other hand, if the government decides not to say you could go into court and say we must, but they have a lot of allies, a lot of friends. And you can see that time and time again. Don't let it be discouraging, though. This is the moment we have the court.
Well, I see that in the comments. A lot of people are fairly discouraged, thinking, well, I thought we had solved this issue. And once again, we're now back. It feels like it's at the starting line.
You got to constantly fight. Did they give up when Roe versus Wade was overturned? Did they say, we're done fighting on this issue? No, they went into the states. They doubled down in their efforts.
And Jordan, when you look at this, what the complaint filed by Planned Parenthood did was, one, it was a clever move by them in light of the Trump v. Casa opinion, where Justice Barrett was essentially saying you can only offer relief to the plaintiffs before you. So what did Planned Parenthood do? Instead of just suing as the Planned Parenthood League of Massachusetts, which is listed as a plaintiff. Also, the lead plaintiff is Planned Parenthood Federation for America on behalf of itself and all 47 of its members. So they brought together, created like a mini class because they're an affiliate organization. So they came on behalf of the entire organization in almost all 50 states and said, we need this relief. They forum shopped. They went to Massachusetts, which it appears that in Massachusetts, if you're pro-life, you're going to be silenced by the government. But if you're pro-abortion, the government must pay your bills. And we're looking at this, and they're alleging 3 issues that they want relief on, and basically the blocking of this portion, Section 71-113 of the big, beautiful bill, that says they want vindicate their rights secured by the Constitution's Bill of Attainder Clause by the First and Fifth Amendments to the United States Constitution. So they're basically saying we're being punished without a trial by looking at this Bill of Attainder Clause, as well as First Amendment. They're saying because we believe in the rights of abortion, we're being punished, and that's a violation of our rights. And the Fifth Amendment of equal protection, that they went very broad here, and they found a judge that was friendly to this entire cause of theirs to give them this TRO. We know there's 2 weeks before an injunction hearing, but this is basically where we stand.
Yes, and what they always are going to argue is, well, it didn't go through the proper procedure. Now, here's the difference in this law, and that the judge, there's no reasoning here. This is a TRO, so you don't have like a opinion at all. You would on an injunction matter, so the next phase. But The difference here is that this is grasping, like you said. They're going through their history. They're going through the right to abortion, except for the court found that there isn't a federally protected right to abortion. That issue would go back to the states. They go state to state and issue to issue. With the court just last week said that you could defund at the state level via Medicaid. So ultimately, here is it a winning battle for them in court? No. This is all an issue of timing. But I think we have to, and we are at the ACLJ taking action, but I do want just people to understand how important it is that we stand up on this issue strongly. Because, and don't get discouraged. Think about how many years we've talked about getting a defunding bill onto the desk of a president who said they would sign it. And it was impossible to get it there. We've actually gotten it there now. Planned Parenthood is not going to give up. They're going to fight back. They want their $500 million. So we have to be ready to take a stand. And you cannot be discouraged. We've had major victories. So this is the time to double down in court. Court has been actually pretty friendly, ultimately long-term to the pro-life movement, especially in the last 5-6 years. So let's keep that pressure up.
And Jordan, just to piggyback off of that, you brought up that the Supreme Court a week and a half ago now in the Medina versus Planned Parenthood case ruled that South Carolina could exclude Planned Parenthood from their providers in Medicaid. And obviously, when you look at that, that's the big takeaway. But when you look at that in light of this, it's really fascinating because Justice Gorsuch wrote that opinion. And it was all about the spending power of Congress. Because the bigger picture was that he was saying that individuals could not sue the state to force Planned Parenthood back into their Medicaid program, because that's not the remedy under the spending power, that there's a contract under the spending power between the state and federal government with Medicaid. This isn't an enumerated right of Congress. It's an inferred right, the spending power under general welfare clause and things of that nature. So it's curious to me as I read the complaint by Planned Parenthood in light of Medina, where the Supreme Court said you can't just sue the state and get your right back here, that they bring up the defund provision is a naked attempt to leverage the government's spending power to attack and penalize Planned Parenthood and impermissibly single it out for unfavorable treatment. Justice Gorsuch, in his opinion, even said that the spending power in and of itself creates benefits for some parties and not for others. Yeah. It doesn't necessarily, unless enumerated, create a right for someone to receive this money.
These are, think of them as like a government contractor, right? So they were bidding to say, we're going to provide these services, so they reimburse us through these programs, and we'll be part of the larger Medicaid program. Do you think that every other company that goes before that just gets a green light? You propose a new jet to the U.S. government. Do they have to go ahead with your production of your jet? No. So this idea that they are entitled to this, that they must now.
The idea of being entitled to any sort of government funding is
Medicaid
pretty ridiculous.
Itself, Congress could go right now.
That's what I'm saying.
There's no constitutional right to getting Medicaid. You can't unfairly say, well, this person. Well, first of all, there are rules on it. Congress can go and say, this is going to be the threshold. This is the income level. This is going to change this year. This is going to expand this year. We're actually going to cut it back this year. And there's all those talks, right? If you can do that to the individuals actually receiving the benefit and to the taxpayers who are paying for the program, these private companies who come before it should be able to be excluded at any time by an act of Congress, certainly, signed by the president. I mean, so listen, it's a losing battle for Planned Parenthood unless they can run out the clock. And if we don't support these members of Congress and the president who signs this into law and actually give them the credit that they deserve to fighting on, to taking it down to the final vote in the Senate, when if they would have removed this provision, it would have been that much easier to pass it.
Let's go to Chris, who's calling on line 1 in Florida. Chris, you're on the air.
In breaking moments ago, the Supreme Court with a decision that will allow the Trump administration to move ahead with their plans to cut the federal workforce, at least for now.
This right now is a order from the Supreme Court essentially saying that a San Francisco judge who put a stop to the Trump administration from cutting several federal agencies, they're saying that the Trump administration, in fact, right now can continue forward as the case plays out on its merits. So essentially back in May, several different agencies sued. They said that the Trump administration wanted to make cuts at the Departments of Agriculture, Commerce, Defense, Energy, Health and Human Services, Homeland Security, HUD, Justice, Labor, State Treasury, and Transportation, pretty much all of them. Now the Supreme Court is giving the Trump administration victory some almost 6 months into the president's second term here, saying that they can go forward with these reductions in forces. You may remember that this was part of the Doge effort when Elon Musk was still hanging out around the White House. But President Trump today, Martha, during the cabinet meeting, said that some of those Doge moves made sense, were important. And this was a campaign promise and a promise really of this presidency to cut some of these federal agencies. And now this administration can feel vindicated from the Supreme Court as they move forward and make some of these cuts, Martha.
So the story is not necessarily that the Supreme Court has ruled in favor of President Trump once again. And of course, they're doubling down on the recent ruling of universal injunctions, which is what this lower court's ruling was all about. The story is what Charlie Kirk and others have already pointed out was another rebuke of Justice Jackson. And this time it didn't come from a conservative justice. It came from Justice Sotomayor. Pay attention to what she writes here. She says, I agree with Justice Jackson that the president cannot restructure federal agencies in a manner inconsistent with congressional mandates. However, in this ruling, the relevant executive order directs agencies to plan reorganizations and reductions in force consistent with applicable law. In other words, what? Due to the fact that this was an 8-1 ruling, the one being Justice Jackson, she is pointing out to her colleague, to the person she is aligned with from a political point of view, that she doesn't even know what she's talking about.
Yeah, just a couple of quick questions for you with regard to whether or not this comes from the Supreme Court's decision that one judge cannot overrule a presidential agenda item. And secondly, what is the impact on whether or not the executive branch, the President of the United States, can cut funding that Congress has approved for these agencies prior?
So I'm going to take the first one first because I know the answer to that much better. The Supreme Court did come down, as you mentioned, with an opinion recently before they did break for their summer recess, albeit they're still working, and said that nationwide injunctions, which were these nationwide pauses, those no longer can go to the level where they did before, where a judge in San Francisco can change a policy for someone that's living in Boston, Massachusetts. So this is something that plays into that because this was a federal judge in San Francisco that said that the Trump administration cannot fulfill this executive order, which affected people that worked at all these different federal agencies.
Okay, so let's just circle back to be thorough and make sure you guys have the full picture here. So President Trump issues an executive order and directs his federal agencies to plan to reorganize and reduce their workforce and to make sure they do it in accordance with applicable law that clearly was legislated by who? Congress. So Justice Jackson issuing her dissent and saying, well, I don't agree with this because the president is not allowed to restructure federal agencies in a manner inconsistent with congressional mandates. But that's not what he did. And the fact that her colleague has to remind her of that, I mean, it just shows you that Justice Jackson is not really doing a good job of proving that she deserves to be there. It's not for me or you or anybody to say that she's not qualified and she doesn't deserve to be there. We know why she's there. And the best way to judge her is on results. The best way to judge her is to look at the opinions that she delivers, her dissents, her record. Judge her on that. And that will tell the story historically on whether or not she really deserved to be a justice.
The second part, I don't want to give the wrong answer. I'm not 100% sure. I'm still reading through this Supreme Court opinion. We didn't expect this to come out today, or I should call it a Supreme Court order, rather. But certainly, Martha, this is something that the Trump administration is going to tout. They've been looking to make cuts in these agencies, and really things have been on pause for this Justice Department and this administration in many ways because they've been tied up with these lower courts, with the district courts, with the circuit courts, and then the Supreme Court delivered them that gift just a couple of weeks ago and said that these nationwide injunctions in many cases must not go forward.
Yeah.
Now, for the people who watch my show, it is so important to pay attention to what's happening in our country from a legal point of view. Remember, it was just a week ago that the Justice Department announced $15 billion worth of fraud that is taking place in Medicare. This is why we are partnered with today's sponsor, Chapter. We're talking about unbiased, independent Medicare advisors that only has one mission in life.
The one-year funding freeze, which came down as a provision in President Trump's spending package. Planned Parenthood called the provision a backdoor abortion ban, warning that the loss of funds could force 200 clinics nationwide to close. The law doesn't name Planned Parenthood specifically, but it does ban federal funding for health clinics that also provide abortions.
Okay, so I'm sure you guys have heard this statement, by their fruits you shall know them. What does that mean? It's what I always say in almost every single episode. Just look at the results. Judge people based results continue to show that they're not issuing these rulings because they really believe in the Constitution. They're issuing these rulings from a political point of view. And they're doing it by getting wrapped up in this tribalism that is continuing to plague our country. Because what's happening is people are blinded from common sense thinking. Now, if this judge bothered to read the Supreme Court's ruling recently and bothered to hear from the government themselves, there would have been no reason to issue this type of injunction.
What's going on here?
I wish I knew on what grounds, but I have to get to the end of the story.
Okay.
The end of the story is that she will be summarily reversed today by the judge by the United States Court of Appeals for the First Circuit. This federal judge in Boston, without hearing from the government, without giving the government even an opportunity to file documents, entered an order restraining Bobby Kennedy and the Department of Health and Human Services from the cutbacks ordered by Congress, and she didn't give any reasons for it. So she clearly will be reversed by the appellate court. She didn't even state any reasons why she was doing it. It's really a head scratcher.
Yeah, absolutely, it's a head scratcher. But good news for President Trump. He got another major legal win from the Supreme Court today, and the appeals court in regards to Planned Parenthood will get another win. And if for whatever reason the appeals court wants to act funny, we already know how the Supreme Court is going to rule. But I guess we shouldn't factor in Justice Jackson because she'll find some off-the-wall reason in order to issue her dissent. Now, let's go to our next story, which is also a head scratcher. We're still talking about Jeffrey Epstein and the infamous Epstein client list. And at this point, who cares about the list? Okay, I told you guys, my concern is more of the victims. But the problem here and the real story is when you overpromise and you underdeliver and you go on Fox News 1,000 times and you act as if, hey, this Epstein client list is a bombshell and you don't deliver. Yeah, the story is not going to go away. So, of course, during the cabinet meeting today that President Trump hosted, the media couldn't help themselves. They had to ask, and President Trump didn't like it. Take a look.
Your memo and release yesterday on Jeffrey Epstein, it left some lingering mysteries. One of the biggest ones is whether he ever worked for an American or foreign intelligence agency. The former labor secretary, who was Miami U.S. Attorney Alex Costa, he allegedly said that he did work for an intelligence agency. So could you resolve whether or not he did? And also, could you say why there was a minute missing from the jailhouse tape on the night of the staff?
Yeah, sure. If
could I just interrupt for 1 second? Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable. Do you want to waste the time and do you feel like answering?
I don't mind answering.
I mean, I can't believe you're asking a question on that. Epstein at a time like this where we're having some of the greatest success and also tragedy with what happened in Texas. It just seems like a desecration, but you go ahead.
Sure. All right. Now, before we move even further, if you guys have been getting value from our channel, please like, share, and subscribe. If you want to support us further, go to the link in the description below, buy us a cup of coffee, or shop our merch store. We got multiple new shirt designs. We got I Support ICE. We got MAGA Pack, and we also have Alligator Alcatraz. And all of them, you can get with a matching coffee mug as well. And don't forget to follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. All right, so let's just pause here. President Trump is frustrated, and I can understand his point of view on why. You have to understand what he's accomplished over the past few weeks, right? Just think about all of the accomplishments here. And now we're talking about Jeffrey Epstein, but he shouldn't be mad at the media. He should be mad at Pam Bondi. She could have nipped this story in the butt on day one and told the media straight up, hey, we have nothing to release when it comes to Epstein. We don't even know if there's anything to release. But they set the expectation that there was going to be information to release. Alina Habba made it sound like there was going to be a huge bombshell. So when they get in there, like I said yesterday, and they say there is nothing, people are not just going to walk away from that. And that's the reality. And I said it on X, you can't fight existing reality. But here's what she had to say. Take a listen.
First, to back up on that, in February, I did an interview on Fox, and it's been getting a lot of attention because I said, I was asked a question about the client list, and my response was, it's sitting on my desk to be reviewed, meaning the file along with the JFK, MLK files as well. That's what I meant by that. Also, to the tens of thousands of video, they turned out to be child porn downloaded by that disgusting Jeffrey Epstein. Child porn is what they were. Never going to be released, never going to see the light of day. To him being an agent, I have no knowledge about that. We can get back to you on that. And the minute missing from the video, we released the video showing definitively the video was not conclusive, but the evidence prior to it was showing he committed suicide. And what was on that, there was a minute that was off the counter. And what we learned from Bureau of Prisons was every year, every night, they redo that video. It's old, from like 1999. So every night the video is reset, and every night should have the same minute missing. So we're looking for that video to release that as well, showing that a minute is missing every night. And that's it on Epstein.
Okay. So, I mean, she thinks people are stupid, right? I mean, not in a million years would I ever buy that explanation about the minute disappearing from the videotape. If a minute is going to be missing from the videotape, then why release the videotape knowing that people are already skeptical? What purpose will that actually serve? In fact, it will just do more damage to your credibility. Why not just release the minute? What are you having to clean up in the minute? Here's another question. Let's say we go with what they're saying. There's nothing there. The case is closed. There is no additional criminals, whatever. Then why is his wife still in prison? That's number one. And then number two, you have Elon Musk saying this, Bannon is in the Epstein files. Now, I have a question for Elon Musk too. Have you seen the files yourself? Because if you're going to continue to make claims like that on X, but you haven't seen the files, then why would you say that if you don't really know? So there's a lot of noise around the files, and the only person we should be pointing fingers at and blaming is Pam Bondi. She's the Department of Justice. She is the Attorney General, and she had an opportunity to nip this in the butt as soon as she was sworn in, and she didn't do it.
I think we're looking at this client list is joining the very long litany of infamous lists in American politics that people aren't willing to show, right? Look, I think the Epstein thing is the Swiss Army knife of conspiracy theories. You can use it for anything you want. Trump used it to kind of to energize the base. Patel, Bondi, and Bongino used it to kind of get their current jobs. And now Musk is seeking to turn it back on all of them in his quest for vengeance. So, I mean, I don't think the Epstein conspiracy case cultural phenomenon is going anywhere because, frankly, too many people benefit from it being around.
Okay, so here is the brutal reality for the right. Unfortunately, the Epstein case is a debacle. It's an explosion. that is definitely going to split the party in some regard. That doesn't mean President Trump is over. It doesn't mean we're going to lose the midterms. In fact, this is not on people's priority list, right? Paying bills, surviving, trying to make sure they're living in a community that's safe for their kids. That's at the top of the list. I know that. But politically, this is not good. This is poison. And the problem is the people who are currently in charge, they did spend time acknowledging that there was a cover-up, that there was more to this story. And when it comes to people on the right, unlike people on the left, you can't just feed us this story and not deliver and think we're not going to say anything. That is the reality. And that's it.
We stuff at a very moving, very deep time of prayer earlier this morning. I'm hoping to bring you some really beautiful scenes from around here, but we have to talk about the latest Biden appearance, public appearance a couple of days back, because it's frankly so good. It so perfectly embodies the current state of the Democrat Party. What if I told you the Democrat Party right now as we speak is collapsing right before our very eyes, and Biden's latest public gaffes are just the tip of the iceberg. So while the legacy media is desperately trying to cover up all the chaos that's happening behind the scenes among the Democrats, the reality is simply impossible to ignore, and Biden is making that explicit. The Democrat establishment is in a free fall, out of touch, out of answers. Stick me to the very end of this video because we're breaking down the data, the headlines, and the shocking truth that the left does not want you to hear. So let's start with Biden himself. If you don't know, just days ago, Biden was actually speaking at a human resource management convention for whatever reason, and he made a rather audacious claim during the Q&A time. Take a look.
We strengthened NATO in a significant way. And I'm getting calls, I'm not going to go into it, I can't, from a number of European leaders asking me to get engaged. I'm not. Get them in place. These things are different. You know, I often ask the question, I ask it to you rhetorically. If America doesn't lead the world, who can? No, not a joke.
So Biden is now claiming that he's still negotiating with world leaders, particularly European leaders, who are calling him up desperate, trying to get him to stop. Now, of course, this is not true. This is not how. He's always had a rather, shall we say, ambiguous relationship with the truth. World leaders hardly took Biden seriously when he was president, when he was auto-penning during his naps on the beach. They're obviously not going to be taking him seriously now. But this off-the-cuff comment reveals a much larger pattern and problem for the Democrats as a whole. Biden's senility is a perfect metaphor for the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party as a whole is every bit out of touch with reality, as is Joe Biden. And the data simply doesn't lie. According to a comprehensive poll by Democrat pollster David Shore, based on a staggering 26 million online responses, the Democrat Party is facing its lowest favorability ever. Young voters are fleeing. The working class support is completely collapsed, and even non-white voter margins are vanishing. In fact, over 60% of Democrat voters want new leadership. The party's approval rating has plunged to the low 20s in the national polls. And Democrats, they've lost key ground in key states, with Republicans now dominating battlegrounds once thought relatively safe for the left. And this is all getting, by the way, this is getting reported by the left-wing rag, the New York Times. This is hardly Republican spin. It's a consensus, a growing consensus among Democrat strategists and leaders themselves. As one senior Democrat advisor was reported as saying, this is the deepest hole he has seen for the Democrats in at least 45 years. And it's not just their plunging polls across the country. The party's riven by infighting, power struggles, plummeting morale. In Florida, for example, high-profile departures and public spats have left the party in shambles, and one leader called the state party dead. So their highest-ranking Democrat in the Florida Senate, their Chuck Schumer, just jumped ship. He left the party. He's now independent, as is New York City Mayor Eric Adams, even the DEI for hire White House spokesperson Kory Pierre. Nationally, Democrats are struggling to find a unifying message. They're struggling to find a leader. The party's split between establishment figures clinging to failed out-of-date strategies and radical activists demanding even more extreme action. And the result? A fractured base, a loss of trust, and an inability to mount any real opposition to MAGA Republican policies. But it gets worse. Nothing compares to what the Democrats have planned for the future. Wait until you see this.
But first, there is something else the media is trying to hide from you. While corrupt federal
Perhaps the most disturbing development here, the recent reports that left-wing activists are telling Democrat lawmakers to, quote, prepare for violence to stop Trump, with some saying there needs to be blood. This isn't just fringe talk. House Democrats themselves are reporting that their base is demanding aggressive, even violent opposition to the Trump administration. And I would argue that this escalation is a direct result of the party's total desperation and lack of direction. When you can't win at the ballot box, the temptation to resort to chaos grows. In other words, just burn the whole thing down. Remember, because they've been locked out of power, the Democrats really only have two resorts, as it were: tyranny and terrorism. So judicial tyranny and all the nationwide injunctions that were handed down by rogue judges in an effort to stop Trump by usurping executive power, and what I call Tesla terrorism, burning Teslas, defacing Tesla dealerships. And of course, that morphed into the LA riots with all the illegals flying Mexican flags on top of burning cars. These have been their only two options, tyranny and terrorism. And unfortunately for the Democrats, the Supreme Court they have nuked their judicial tyranny. Nationwide injunctions are now officially dead. And so what's the only thing they have left? So this is a very dangerous moment, I believe, for our nation, and a very clear sign that the Democrats can no longer be trusted with power ever again. So what does all this mean? Well, the Democrat Party is collapsing, and it's collapsing under the weight of its own contradictions. It's collapsing under a leadership vacuum. Right. They obviously have no clear, effective leader, just finger pointing, blame shifting, and the like. They're collapsing under a loss of core voters. So their working class voters are leaving, non-white voters are leaving, young voters are leaving in droves. They're collapsing under very dangerous rhetoric with calls of violence from their party's own base, which more and more alienates them from the common sense consensus. And they're collapsing under out-of-touch elites, with Biden's comments simply being a metaphor for just how disconnected the Democrat Party as a whole is from reality. So for us, this is an amazing moment, a moment where our political enemies are literally destroying themselves. I know there's lots of concerns about the Trump-Elon, infighting and just the whole Epstein files disaster that have been Pam Bondi and Kash Patel. But that does not even come close to comparing to the very real implosion that's happening to the Democratic Party as we speak. And no one embodies that implosion more than good old Sleepy Joe. So what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. I'm going to take in some more sites, and I hope to bring you with me.
Let's just say this too. That
I feel terrible for
you can't. No one's overlooking all the good that they've done just because
you can't. We're not having that conversation. Right. This isn't a if not this then that.
No,
this is we're separating.
I'm still voting for Donald Trump. I'm still behind Donald Trump.
Yes. That's not the point. The point is you can't shut the door on people who you've campaigned to think outside the box, to ask questions, to take off the masks, to think about science. Who's telling you what to do? Whom do you trust? He ran as the guy to trust. I will pledge to you that. That's what he said. So these two things don't work together. One of these things is not like the other. And if we call that out, so be it. It needs to be. I have to read you a little bit of this article from 2021. It's not like we think the CIA is clean. These might be the filthiest, slimiest, swampiest people around. Somehow they gravitate towards the CIA. I guess it's a prerequisite. Well, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Wendy Bell radio program. We just heard from Tucker Carlson and his guest on his podcast yesterday, who was talking about a BuzzFeed article a couple years ago about CIA operatives getting involved in child porn. And it's so beyond your just wild, ugh. But I found it, okay? BuzzFeed News, this is from 2021, December 1st. Secret CIA files say staffers committed sex crimes involving children. Declassified CIA Inspector General reports show a pattern of abuse and a repeated decision by federal prosecutors not to hold agency personnel accountable. That's unacceptable. We voted against that. We voted against secrecy. We voted for transparency. I spent the last 5 years hunting and pecking for granular data, whether it be about COVID, about the stupid jab, about deaths, about child migration, about all of it. Don't tell me now that I should put my mask back on and my blinders because there's nothing to see here. If there's something bigger, Mr. President, at play, which undoubtedly there is a much better way to communicate it with the American people. And everything that you guys have done since you took office regarding this case has sucked. And we don't want more people to be allowed to get away with most disgusting behavior on planet Earth. It's bad enough that your entire freaking Congress is loaded because they are insider traders, and there's no term limits, there's no accountability, there's no punishment. They just get away with it. And we, the people, are pissed. Don't tell us we should stop asking questions. Am I clear? Okay. I feel much better. I don't know how much more clear I can be about that. We're tired of being lied to. They lie about everything. They lie about everything. It's disgusting. And we voted in mass 77 million strong for a new chapter to clean it up. We voted to see people get cuffed and put in orange jumpsuits. And by the way, if it was Brennan or Comey or Clapper or any of those clowns, I believe we'd probably all be down for public square stoning or bringing back the guillotine. That's how we feel. Do not discount us, because we are aware and we aren't fooled. Dan Bongino tweeted out something yesterday. Didn't work very well. Here's the tweet. He says, an update for you out of FBI Minneapolis. 900 pounds of meth seized during 2 traffic stops in Minnesota yesterday. In a hit targeting drug trafficking rings you'll hear about soon. We're finding them and crushing their operations. More to come, thanks to our partners for the coordination. That's a big story. That is a big victory. The timing of that dropping sucks, and it makes people on my side of the aisle angry. Why? Don't pepper us with a bunch of yah, wah, wah wins and say, look, we're doing great things. You are doing great things. But you can't step in it and then expect us to be like, oh, but good job. Responses to this post. I dare say, Dan Bongino and Kash Patel going on Fox News with their eyes as big as saucers and saying to Maria Bartiromo and the rest of the world, I saw the files. Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. Might be the final blow. Might be the career-ending, disqualifying moment in Dan Bongino and Kash Patel's career. I want you to see some of the responses to that. You ready? How about this? Well, what about the rich people that raped kids on an island? Right? How about this? They're trying anything to distract from Epstein, LOL. This one from Mindy. Cool story. Can you do something about the pedos, the pedophiles in power in our government? Or nah? Oh, super work. Not happy about the gaslighting and lying about Epstein. I mean, it goes on and on and on. Here we go. You can find drugs, but can't find that client list. I don't see the Epstein files in there. Find drugs, but not a list. Don't distract. Tell us who's on the list. Do you understand what happened now? See, the administration that wanted you to believe that the main difference between them and all the others preceding it is transparency. Just shut the door on that transparency. So which is it? Whom do we believe? Whom do we trust? Yeah, MAGA Nation has a reason to be upset. So wild that the left still is just not at all fazed by this. When we come back on the Wendy Bell radio program, we're going to talk about timing being everything. FBI big news next. It's a
on, and I was scared. Separate you, my truth and
welcome back
radio program.
Welcome back. Hour number 2 of the Wendy Bell radio program is official. For those of you just tuning in, I'll get you the quick recap of the last hour. Look, whether they want to tell you the truth or not, America wants answers when America's children are being sexually exploited. And I don't care who it is who's telling you there's nothing to President Trump. Whatever his rationale to curtly cut off a reporter and say, you're going to waste our time to talk about Jeffrey Epstein. Yes. And I'm sorry that he can't see that. I'm sorry that I don't know the bigger machinations at play, because there are way bigger machinations. But we joined together on November 5th because we believe in something. And I believe in this president, and I believe that he will do the right thing. And I stand by my assertion that he fumbled this ball big time. And he deserves to be called out for it. There is nuance in communication. But there's also just authentic common sense. And saying, you know what? I ran on exposing the swamp. And that is still a campaign pledge of mine. And it will be one of my administration's top priorities. But we have waded into a bag of filth, the likes of which we were not prepared. And until we know what we're dealing with and can do this in an appropriate way, please give us some grace, give us some space, and we will get back to you. Instead, he said, there's nothing to see here. And please, Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. Okay. And Derek Chauvin killed George Floyd. Is that too soon? Because if we're going to talk about truth, let's go. So on the other side of this story, as the Make America Great Again crowd, of which I am a card-carrying member, proudly, as we're all fuming that the number one thing we wanted to put an end to, child sex trafficking, right? Our hearts can bleed over the story of the little girls from Dallas who were part of that Camp Mystic flooding horror, who were found dead, holding hands with their rosaries in their hands. We can collectively agree that that destroys us. That one child ever is one child too many. But we're supposed to put this to bed. I can't put that genie back in the bottle. And then what happens a couple hours later just seems typical deep state smokescreen stuff. Huge story, big story, necessary story, odd timing. FBI launches criminal investigations of John Brennan and James Comey over the Trump-Russia probe. Right? I mean, right after Dan Bongino posts out, hey, huge 900-pound meth bust conducted by the FBI. Look, this is not to take away from any of the administration's accomplishments. Don't conflate this. Don't say, Wendy, don't talk about this. Don't you know how hard they're working? Don't you get it? No, I do get it. But the mom in me will never forget it. And they better do some damage control ASAP. Here's your story about Brennan. What a turd. Former CIA Director John Brennan and the ex-FBI Director James Comey. I wonder if he went on the beach yesterday, maybe took another stroll in the sand and came across another wild seashell discovery. What an absolute jerk. Being investigated for potential criminal conduct related to the 2016 Trump-Russia collusion probe. They're all dark as nuts. Criminal referral involving Brennan was passed to the FBI by current CIA Director John Ratcliffe, Justice Department sources say. The investigation into the Obama-era spy chief involves allegations that he made false statements to Congress and is currently underway. I mean, who the hell hasn't made freaking false statements to Congress? Tony Fauci? Senator Paul, you do not know what you were talking about. Well, let me just ask you one more time. I mean, we have the receipts. This is like when my son Bobby gets caught in a lie. It's that moment you see it in their eyes and they start to sweat wildly where they know they're busted, but they just can't say, yeah, I did that. They have to keep going down the lie lane, right? And it gets worse and worse and worse. Bring him in front of the cameras again. Dr. Fauci, would you like to tell us about gain-of-function research? Because we have all the contracts. Tell me what you know about Ralph Barrett, the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Because we have all, you do not know what you were talking about. until there are consequences, until I see somebody in a freaking orange jumpsuit. All of these headlines. Well, all right, you're doing your job. Of course they lied. That's the thing. I'm like, oh, now that they say it's official, oh, now we can talk about it. Got it. Did you guys not with me? Years ago, 5 years ago, when we were talking about John Paul McIsaac and his little Delaware Mac repair shop, that poor dude who Hunter Biden stoned out of his mind is like, I have 3 damaged laptops. Can you look at them? Yes, I can. He leaves, right? And all of a sudden, this unassuming dude is in danger because it's so freaking dirty. I'm a simple woman. Super simple. I like cold beer, cutting the grass, golfing, and hanging with my sons. Honest to God, that's as far as it gets. Maybe fresh flowers. That's pretty good too. I'm not involved in this kind of crap, but I'm not stupid. And we all knew 51 former intelligence officials signed on the dotted line and said, no, it has all the earmarks of a Russian disinformation campaign. Stop it. Stop it. This is the crux of my ire for Trump right now. Do you not know, Mr. President, that we are wide awake? We might not have all of the access. I have no idea what the bigger story is. That's beyond my pay grade. But the good Lord did bequeath upon me this beautiful 2-word thing called common sense, which oddly, my Newsmax TV show on the weekend is named. Why ever would that be? Because there is a dearth of it anymore. So they're going to go into this thing. Oh, he knew about this. They had the Steele dossier. They did all these things with Trump. They lied about the laptop, blah, 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 blah. And now we're going to investigate John Brennan and Comey. Does anybody out there think, well, what's going to happen? How many times on my live stream here, wendybellradio.com, how many times do you guys write, yeah, but nobody's ever going to face justice. Nobody's ever going to go to prison. Nobody's ever going to be held accountable. In my mind, much bigger than this headline, this just in, breaking news. It's an alert. They're investigating dirtbags for being dirtbags. What? Far bigger than that is the idea of anybody in this administration that thinks that you and I haven't been lied to far more than our fair share. Period. They lie about the border. They lied about Benghazi. They lied about the vaccine. They lied about the natural origins. They lied about the bat lady. They lied about all of it. And they charge you with the bill, right? Does anybody in the swamp not realize that we have reached satiety? I'm full, sort of like I'm pushing back my chair from Thanksgiving dinner. I've had enough turkey. The stuffing is coming out of my ears. Whew, I'm done. America is done. Now, be in your silo and go all in on Donald Trump. Nothing can be wrong with Donald Trump. He's the guy. He's the only guy. Okay. Be on the other side. I don't care. But shouldn't we all agree that protecting children is the one thing that should bring us together? Or is even that too much to ask? When we come back on the Wendy Bell Radio program, we got to talk about the silence, totally deafening. Why is the left so oddly quiet about the DOJ's report that there is no Epstein client list, no evidence of blackmail? I mean, like, thank goodness Jake the Snake Tapper is on the scene. He's got it covered next.